Last week we began a message series called KINGDOMnomics, and it's just kind of a word I made up, but it's as we focus on stewardship during these 4 weeks. On your way in last week, you probably got a commitment card, and there's a table in the back that has these on there as well. These are for anyone who calls Shiloh Church their church home. If you're visiting today, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you're going to get to hear how we talk about money. But I want you to know we're not asking you to participate in our stewardship campaign, but we do want you to be prayerful about how you are giving in a way that makes God smile. This series is not really about economics. It's not really about money. This is why we called it KINGDOMnomics, because it's really about our faith in God and how we live out our faith in very real ways. But Jesus said, where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. And I think we can all admit that often our finances and our treasure are wrapped up together. And so it's important that we talk about where our hearts are and where we're called to be. Last week we said that KINGDOMnomics was about a new set of rules and new definitions and a new way of thinking about our resources that God has lent to us. So the definition we gave last week for KINGDOMnomics was a biblical and spiritual understanding of how to steward the resources that God has lent to us. Now, we read a verse last week that I promised that we'd come back to today, because I saw a lot of you kind of perk up and listen a little extra carefully, but we didn't go there. But I want to come back to that. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, the verse simply says this. Paul says, "You will be made rich in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God." Now, a lot of times we preach this in church and we focus on that last half of that verse. We talk about generosity and we talk about thanksgiving, and those are admirable things that we ought to focus on, definitely. But I want to not pretend that Paul didn't say the first part of the verse. He said, "You will be made rich in every way." And I don't know about you, but that grabs my attention. Maybe it's the capitalist in me. Maybe it's poking at the American dream that has been so deeply rooted and brought up in my life. But something about when Paul says you will be made rich makes me go, tell me more, Paul. Now you've got my attention. I want to know more about this. And who doesn't want to be rich? Recently I've been wrestling with sleeping well. I just haven't been sleeping well, so I get up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll be watching late night television. Anybody watch late night television sometimes? No matter how many channels you have, there is nothing on, right? It's garbage TV or infomercials. So I have kind of gotten into this infomercial thing, and I'm interested in what they think people will buy at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's been very interesting to me to see what they think our interests are at 3 o'clock in the morning. And if you pay much attention to them, it has to do with weight loss, sex, and money, right? Those are the 3 things that apparently at 3 o'clock in the morning are on our minds, probably because we're eating a bowl of ice cream at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was watching TV the other day, and there was a show called The Secret to Hitting It Big. And I thought, this ought to be interesting. And so I watched, and sure enough, it was about like I thought it might be. It was, if you would buy into our program, buy our program and follow these 3 simple steps, then you too can be wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. And I was a little disappointed. So I turned the channel, and just below that, in the channel guide, was a show called How to Win the Lottery. And I thought, you got my attention. And so I watched, and in this show, it talked about that there are 6 numbers that are the luckiest numbers in the lottery. These numbers hit more than any other numbers at all. And so here's what I want. I know all of us good Methodists, none of us gamble, none of us buy lottery tickets. But I want to hear you say, if a relative of yours hits these numbers, you know what to do. okay? But it's not just the lottery and late night television that are poking at that rich button, that want to be wealthy button, that I want to hit it big kind of dream that's inside of us. It's the church too. You know, if you weren't here this morning, if you were watching television, watching church on TV, a lot of the morning television has to do with what we call a prosperity gospel. That if you buy our prayer cloth, that if you buy our oil, if you give a donation, if you sow a seed, then God's highest priority is going to be to make you rich. And the church buys into this mentality and trying to figure out the secret to hitting it big. And today I want to look at what the Bible really says about the secret to hitting it big. So grab a Bible with me and turn to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, starting at verse 10. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says. It says, I greatly rejoice in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. And I have learned the secret to being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And Paul finishes it with these amazing words, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. You know, as I read this passage and I think about hitting it big and what does that really look like in our lives, and one of the things I think I hear Paul saying is that at the end of the day, all wealth is relative. I mean, all wealth is relative. Paul says, listen, I've been rich. I've been poor. I've been on both ends, and I know what it's like in both places, and at the same time, it's all the same. And I thought about that when I looked at my own life, and I thought, you know, it really depends on who you're comparing yourself to, doesn't it? So if I compare myself to Oprah and Bill Gates, you know, I'm probably not rich, right? But you compare my financial situation with most of the world, the rest of the world, then the vast majority of those who are struggling, then I'm doing pretty well. And I looked around and did a little research on poverty and some statistics on poverty. The poverty line in the United States is about $16.60 a day. So those who live below that are considered in poverty at $16.60 a day. But did you know the United Nations did a study of world economics? And about 1/2 of the world's population, or 2.8 billion people, live on less than $2 a day. And about half of them, about 1.2 billion people, live on less than $1 a day. See, all wealth is really relative. And so I've been asking, you know, what is wealth? What does it mean to be wealthy or to be rich, like Paul said? And another study I read that said most of us feel like we're about 10 to 15% away, no matter where we are. So think about that. Wherever you are right now, my guess is at some point you've said, man, if I could just get there, just a little more, just a little higher. And I remember, this really struck a chord in this, because I remember a conversation my wife and I had back when we were in college, and we were just struggling to try to make it through, and I was working as a waiter at the Olive Garden. I was bringing home about $18,000 a year, and I mean, every nickel count. And I remember us having the conversation, honey, if we can just get to $20,000 a year, if we could just get there, we'd be on easy street. You know, life would be golden. And if we fall into the trap of economics, what we realize is that the more we have, the more we feel like we need. And it's this revolving door of economics. J.D. Rockefeller was asked one time, how much money is he going to need to make a person happy? And he said, just one more dollar. Right? One of the richest people on this planet. And he said, just one more, because the more you have, the more you feel like you need. A couple of months ago, my wife got a raise at her job. And it was a big celebration for us. We were very excited. She got called into the office, and they said, hey, we really want to bless you for the work you've been doing. And I gave her a $2 an hour raise, which was a big deal in our family. It equaled out to about $160 a paycheck. And so we got that first paycheck, and it was like, oh, the angels were singing, and, we're in the money, and, there's all this extra cash there, and we were like, yay, this is great. And like 3 weeks later, we start working with that. That becomes our new norm. And so we've got the wedding fund, and we've got the college fund, and we've got the Christmas fund. And all of a sudden, last Friday, we sat down to do our bills, and she goes, wasn't my raise on that paycheck? I'm like, yeah, it's gone. I don't know what happened. Our consumer nature just eats these things up, and the more you have, the more you feel like you need, because all wealth is relative. Why is it that we only feel tempted to play the lottery when it's $300 million or more? Right? As if we look at it and go, what would I do with $27 million? I mean, right? Because all wealth is relative. Proverbs says this: don't wear yourself out to get rich. Don't trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they'll be gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. And we can fall into this trap of this revolving economics door to the point where we kind of lose touch with what wealth and what it really means to be rich. And the true nature of the gifts that God has given us. We can lose touch with reality. I want to show you a short video. This video was taken on Madison Avenue in New York City, one of the wealthiest stretches on the planet. And the person was asking this
people,
video,
this is Tim Murphy from
how do
New
you
York
save
Magazine.
money?
Well, hey people, this is Tim Murphy for New York Magazine. Well, that chill you feel in the air isn't just the winter cold setting in. The downturn in the economy is affecting us all. So today we're on the street talking to some everyday New Yorkers about how they're going to stretch their dollars on staples this holiday season. What have you bought today?
I bought a very nice Burberry pea coat.
Give me a ballpark on how much you think you've spent.
Probably a couple thousand.
Okay.
I just got some glasses. They were cheap. They were I got the $200 ones instead of the ones that were $4. Just because I'm trying to be, a good person.
Right. In this time when we're all feeling a pinch, how are you cutting back and stretching your dollar a little more?
I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
How are you cutting back?
I've been shopping, but not as much as I used to.
I think that I now only buy things that are on sale.
instead of buying 2 or 3 things, you buy one.
I'm eliminating silliness,
Yeah.
necessities more than superfluous nonsense.
What's the last thing you bought?
That's a good question. A money clip, actually.
That's not. Where'd you get it?
Tiffany.
Oh, okay. But wouldn't a rubber band have done?
It would. I just don't like rubber bands.
Before this economy was like it was, I would just go in and just pick out everything. But now I'm being very conscious. Like I go directly to the sale rack. With the economy right now.
Trying to stretch a dollar.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Christmas will be more of a challenge because I'm not going to just look for things on sale. I think my husband would probably prefer that I trim back a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't think
Do you think you're capable of that?
I don't think so.
You may be heading down to Century 21 or...
I don't know what Century 21 is. What is Century 21?
What did you find at Men's Warehouse or at Century 21?
I'm scared of those places. I actually don't go to them.
Do you see how quickly we can lose touch with the realities of of the resources that God has given us. And economics runs on a scarcity model, whereas kingdomnomics runs on an abundance model. Scarcity is the definition of scarcity is the fundamental economic problem of having humans who have unlimited needs and wants in a world of limited resources. And so economics tells us get all you can before it's gone. But kingdomnomics is different. Kingdomnomics runs on an abundance model. Kingdomnomics reminds us that the kingdomnomic answer of humans to acknowledge that God will supply all of our needs. That we live in a world of abundance where Jesus says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I come that you can have life and have it abundantly, have it to the fullest, have overflowing life. What does it mean to be rich? Listen to what Jesus says about our stuff. He says, don't store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, treasures on earth where moths and vermin and destroy, but where thieves break in and steal. But instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. No one can serve two masters. You'll either love one and hate the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And see, true wealth and true riches, I believe it's got to be something deeper than the stuff we collect or the things that we have. Even Jesus said in Mark 8, what good is it for you to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? Forfeit the most important thing. And so what does it mean? What does it mean to hit it big? What is wealth? What is riches? The Bible has a word that translated from Hebrews, the word is shalom. Probably heard this word before. Shalom, we often translate it as peace. And I think that's a good translation, but it's bigger than peace, because peace we often think is just the absence of conflict. It's bigger than just peace. Shalom is about wholeness. It's about being right with God and with others. It's about our well-being. It's about the song we sang, "It is well with my soul." So shalom doesn't depend on my circumstances or my bank account or my comfort zones or anything else. Shalom is a gift from God that even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of our pain, we can have shalom. My son and I have done a lot of college visits over this last summer, and so Julie and Ben and I were coming home from one of these college visits a couple of weeks ago, and we were just coming back into Cincinnati, and we'd just turned off of Elberon Avenue onto 8th Street. And so every time we have these college visits, we like to talk about the future and what he's going to do and how hard he's going to need to work. And we really have the mom and dad conversation. You parents who've sent kids to college, you know what I'm talking about. And just kind of setting them up. And so I remember we asked him, we said, Ben, so what are your plans, man? What does the future look like to you? And boy, he had an answer in 2 seconds. I couldn't believe it. Rolled off his tongue like he'd been saying it since he was 3. He said, Dad, here's my plan. 6 figures by 30, 7 figures by 40. And I thought to myself, hey, good plan. I thought, all right. Well, at least you got a goal, right? And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, the economist in me was thinking through that. And like 10 minutes later, we're driving up 8th Street, and I wish I could have taken a picture, because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to describe it to you as well. But there was a guy over here on the sidewalk on the right. He was an older gentleman, probably about in his early 70s, late 60s maybe. He was probably about 350 pounds, so a larger guy. He was riding on one of those little scooters, little red scooters, and he had a vest on and a white shirt, and he had a bunch of bags with him that were hanging off of either side and in a basket behind him. And he was riding up 8th Street with a chain holding a little chihuahua. I mean, this thing was like this big, and the proportions were very strange. Anyway, but he had this smile on his face. He just was this was the best day he'd ever had. You could just tell by his smile. And so the whole family sees this guy, but nobody says anything. You're kind of building his story in your own head, thinking what his life must be like. And my son from the back seat goes, "Hey, Dad, I want to be that guy. He looks happy with life." And I thought to myself, the economic side of me said, 6 figures by 30, 7 figures by 40. But the KINGDOMnomics side says, at the end of the day, isn't true riches about shalom? Isn't it about peace, wellness, being able to smile in the midst of chaos? Isn't that what it's all about? And so Paul gives us this secret to hitting it big. And he says, the secret is being content. Being content. This is the secret. Now, contentment is not about giving up or giving in. It's not about settling for less than God's best in your life or even being happy about your current circumstances. Contentment is simply saying, wherever I am, however I am, God is with me right now, right here. And I can do all things because God gives me strength. I can do all things because God gives me strength. Finding joy in our present rather than spending all our energy trying to chase after some future. Proverb says this: there is one who makes himself rich yet has nothing, and one who makes himself poor yet has great riches. I think all of us know those folks who seem to have it all except shalom. And don't you feel sorry for them? Don't you feel like they missed the thing that mattered the most? The other thing that I thought was interesting as I was studying for this message, I was looking at the rich and the poor and the dynamics between those. And one of the things I came across was the reality that percentage-wise, those who have less tend to give more. Look at this chart. This is a chart from 2006 to 2012. As the economy made a downturn, if you made less than $25,000 a year between those 6 years, your giving to charitable organizations increased by almost 17%. But if you made over $200,000 a year, your giving decreased by almost 5%. And so it brings me back to this place that at the end of the day, church, it's not about economics. It's about KINGDOMnomics. I heard you make a living by what you earn, but you make a life by what you give. So as we step into communion, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is Richard Cordray, and Richard is a member of our youth group, and he wanted to share with you a little bit of his testimony about what it means to give in a way that makes God smile. So check this out.
My name is Richard Cordray. I've been going to Shiloh for about 7 years now. And one thing I like about Shiloh is the youth. What I like the most about youth ministry is that there's so many options of when to come and so many options of what to do. So I got the idea from making the giving can when I was upstairs in the children's ministry, and we had a giving can up there. It was an orange little bucket, and then I came to the youth room and I said, hey, we don't have a giving can here. And And one day I went to regular church where the adults go, and I noticed that they also had time for giving tithe. And so I came back here and I said, well, I wonder why we don't have it. And so one day after youth group, I think it was, we went to Home Depot, and I said, hey, that would make a perfect tithe can. And so I made it, brought it home, and cut the hole in it and everything. And the next church service we had, I asked Brent, and he said I could put it on the table and see if it worked, and it's worked ever since. I think what the adults can learn from the teenagers about giving is if the teenagers can give, I think the adults can give too. And I challenge you to give in a way that makes God happy.
Church, I leave you with these words. If you remember that you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength, you are the richest person on the planet. Take that gift with you today. My prayer for you is that you will continue to pray over God's call for you. For those of you who call Shiloh Church your church home, what does my commitment in 2016 look like that makes God smile? Don't forget our Kingdom Investors Dinner here next Sunday. And right after church, head down to John Wesley Hall and celebrate the Kruger Memorial Breakfast. I love you because Jesus loves you. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go in peace, church.